Hey, what's up, paintballers? This is another fitness video for paintball players. And in this video, we're going to talk about fitness, particularly for older people. And all of you older people or people worried about getting older and maintaining your level of athleticism, you can thank Paul Benyon of Did It Hurt for requesting this kind of content. So, Paul, this is for you. Sorry, it's a little bit overdue, but it's the way things go sometimes. We're going to do a screen capture of some film that I recorded a few days ago when I finally was able to get to the gym and do some filming. So this is going to be just kind of a part one of who knows how many. For people who are older, I myself am staring down the barrel of 40 years old. I'm basically coming off of 3 years of very intermittent fitness. I have only worked out 4 times total in the last 4 or 5 months. That's just kind of been the story of winter 2023. So in this video, I am very stiff. If you're an older person, you can probably relate to this. And I'm just going to show you what I did to loosen myself up, and you're going to see a pretty big reveal. You're going to see the power of movement visually in this video. We're going to show you how some very simple movements that any one of you who are fit or well enough to play paintball should be able to go and do right now at this gym and see the exact kind of progress, not identical, but progress simply by following some simple movements and committing to get moving and improve your mobility, improve your fitness. So let's get to the video. All right, so this is the turf field at my gym. It's a pretty fancy gym, not gonna lie. But we're gonna stay on this field. So you can do this on a mat, an open space, preferably just not a hard floor. I'm on the turf because it's softer and there's not a whole lot of mat space at my gym. So this just kind of makes it easy to both film and be on the type of surface that I wanna be on. So let's get going. I am going to get into a split stance and then down into what you might call a runner's lunge. But in this position, I am not just turning on my core. I'm not just kind of loosening up my hips. I am also stretching my ankles and even the arch of my foot by having my big toe raised up. So I'm actually stretching a lot more than what you might look at this and go, oh, okay, I see what that's for. There's a lot more going on here than you really realize. So I have cut this video to try to minimize time, but I essentially hang out here for anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. You might want to spend more time on this position if you're feeling stiffer and it's feeling like it's slowly loosening up, but then do the other side. We are turning on little things like the shoulders. One side of the body is in a squat position. If you look at the hip, the knee, the ankle on one side, it's the same position you would be in if you were in a squat. So we're kind of going through some fundamental movement patterns, but without putting all of our body weight through both of our legs. So here I'm adding a rotation, and notice I'm actually stopping by putting my hand on my knee, then rotating. So here goes my right hand on my knee to help me twist. This is early in the morning, I'm still waking up. Then I open up, come back to the knee, back to the ground, and this is all just going to make sure that you are not losing your balance. You're going to be in control the entire time. So there, we're in a plank. We go to a pike. You can tell I am very stiff, especially if you saw me a few years ago before the pandemic. I am in very bad shape compared to a few years ago. So this is kind of a reverse inchworm. This is more so to turn on the shoulders as we back into this somewhat of a standing hamstring stretch. Now this position is not so much to stretch the hamstrings. You can see my knees are pretty bent. We were stretching the hamstrings on the way back into this position on standing, hunched over, but that position, I'm actually taking deep breaths using diaphragmatic breathing, meaning drawing your breath through your lungs but into your belly, trying to expand the belly the way we should be breathing. What that does is puts pressure all around our core and particularly our lower back. So if you haven't been moving very much like myself the last few years, you probably have a stiff and or weak lower back. And by getting into this position and drawing a deep breath down into your core, you're going to stretch some of those really stiff tissues and it's going to help loosen them up. So keep that in mind in this position. It might be something that you want to do more of. Again, I chopped this video down into 10 minutes. I basically spent probably 15 or 20 minutes just going through some motions, focusing on breathing, and repeating these movement patterns on each side several times. So again, slowly going back into an inchworm, into a plank position. And now what I'm going to do is actually walk. Well, I guess I'm getting into a plank here. I can't remember exactly the pattern that I went through, but here, instead of walking my hands back, I'm walking my feet forwards, and that does make it a little bit different. It's going to turn on the lower body a little bit more. So again, breathing into my core here, hunched over, slightly stretching my hamstrings, but mostly just focusing on breathing into my belly to make sure all those tissues around your core, your lower back, are expanding and contracting passively just through breathing. So now I'm going to start focusing on the tissues inside the legs, so between the legs, the groin essentially. We're getting, again, into a staggered stance, but instead of having a leg behind me, my leg is out to the side. So not that different than what we started with. I'm essentially sinking down, but not holding for a long time, just kind of like 5 or 10 seconds on each side. You can see here I'm kind of like pulsing, just trying to figure out, okay, exactly how far can I get onto each side in the stretch. I used to be able to just sink it down into this, no problem. I was super loose. Not the case anymore. So I'm just gradually going side to side. I do this a few times. You can do the pulse. You can just hold whatever feels most comfortable and safest for you. But it's important not just to warm up the hamstrings on the back side of the legs. It's important to go 360 degrees around every joint. So we've done the back side, the hamstrings. We've kind of done the front side, the hip flexors, by going into that runner's lunge position at the beginning. And here we're doing the insides. So spend some time bouncing back and forth. Sorry, this is not going to be a short video. This is not for entertainment purposes for you younger people. This is for educational purposes for us older people. And I guarantee you, the older people that know what it's like to be stiff and lose a lot of that athleticism they had when they were younger, they're going to appreciate this. So I'm sorry it's not a longer video, but if you're complaining about it, this video is not for you. So now I'm bringing everything together. I am in a squat position. Remember at the very beginning, I started in a squat position on each side of the body, one at a time, in that runner's lunge, warmed up, and now I'm bringing it together where I'm in a squat. I'm holding all of my body weight in the squat position through both legs. I'm already feeling a lot looser, but here's where you're going to see the before of the magic that happens. I'm going to twist upwards. Look how far my right arm can go up in the air versus my left. My left is missing a good 15, maybe even 20 degrees of trying to be able to reach perfectly vertical. Again, look at my right arm, perfectly vertical above me. Look at my left arm. I am missing some trunk rotation because that's how much stiffness I have through my spine, particularly in the lower to mid back area, or mid thoracic as we would talk about it professionally. So I know I'm stiff. I know I'm not completely mobile. I'm just trying to get moving here, doing some runner's lunges or reverse lunges, and starting to get more into a movement-oriented warm-up. So not so much focus on little dynamic stretches. I'm trying to actually start moving, because what I'm going to do is some very low-level conditioning that you'll see here in a minute. So before I start running, I just wanted to go through that lunge pattern so that I can do this. And this is multiple things going on once again here. Us older guys, us out of shape people, even young healthy people, we all need to be working on our conditioning, our cardio essentially. But we can't, especially in paintball, just focus on running straight forward and backwards. We need to be focusing on changing directions, exposing our joints to acceleration, deceleration, and changing of direction. And this is a really simple, safe way to do that. So I'm essentially doing suicides. If you ever played basketball or had a gym class and you did suicides from like baseline to free throw, back to baseline to half court, back, you get the idea. So I'm just doing a simple change of direction at like 50% intensity. I'm not trying to push it. I'm just trying to get moving. So don't go real hard from the get-go. So now that I've done one little run, kind of got my lungs huffing and puffing, I need to recover, I'm going to keep moving, but while letting my lungs recharge. So I started with a little plank there, did a little plank tap to kind of work on my balance for a second. And now I'm doing some push-ups, which is really just to focus on getting my shoulders stronger. I'm not trying to develop my chest. I'm not trying to impress anyone with muscle development or how many push-ups or how strong my chest is. I'm literally just focused on, I need to get my shoulders stronger and healthier. And a push-up is a really easy way to do that with no equipment. So it's literally something you should be able to do at home. You might not be able to do a full push-up. That's okay. Just go down as far as you can and then come back up. If you don't have the full range of motion, that's perfectly okay. So I'm creating myself essentially a circuit here that you can do at home. I did this, I think, 4 rounds. And after the 4th suicide, I was like, okay, that's enough for me. It is early in the morning. Once again, only my 4th workout in half a year. So that was plenty. So I essentially repeat this whole circuit here, but I want to see how much looser am I after doing this. And I did a little rotation and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much looser after doing just 1 round of that circuit. So to check and make sure, does this actually transfer to the squat that I did earlier? I get down into that position, check. Yeah, I can still go perfectly vertical with my right. What about my left? And look at that. Bam. Perfectly vertical, or maybe a few degrees off, but like way different than before. You can go back and look at that part of the video if you want to see just how much of a difference that made. So I did that whole circuit 4 times, like I said. The suicide run, some plank taps just to make sure I'm working on some core control by having one arm off the ground in that plank position. So working on my balance through my core and my shoulders. 5 to 10 eccentric push-ups to just make sure I am working on control. Again, not repping out a bunch real fast. I want to make sure I'm developing control through my shoulders because I'm lacking that right now. So if you're lacking control, if you're lacking stability, focus on going slow at first. It's just like anything new that you're learning, basically. Like you need to start slow before you get fast. So now we go, after I did 4 rounds of that circuit, I came over to do a little bit of upper body work. I am not a big fan. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do shoulder raises straight out to the front, but a good way that I like to think of it is the juice is not worth the squeeze. You do risk a lot of pinching in your shoulders, raising dumbbells out to the front, especially if you lift with a little bit of an ego and you go a little too heavy too soon. So notice here, I never lift these out in front of me. I stay in what's kind of called the scaption plane, which is basically a Y shape, or even out to the side. So that's the range I would recommend staying in. I'm also not going real heavy. I started with 5 pounds and then moved up to 10 pounds, did not go any heavier than that. You can lift these however high is appropriate, but I did a few to parallel with the ground. And then once I felt comfortable, I went all the way up. And the more range of motion, the better. Again, I would not do way out here in the front, especially all the way to top range of motion in that plane. But out to the sides, your shoulder's going to be in a more open position, and so that's going to be safer. I wasn't originally going to film this part. I wanted to just get a little bit more work through the arms because my grip, everything's gotten weaker. So everything from my grip through my elbows, through my shoulder has all been just slowly atrophying over the last few years. So this is actually not for vanity's sake. It's not to pump my arms up or anything. It's literally just to try to develop some more strength through my arms and my hands. And while I was doing these tricep presses on the TRX, I was shaking so hard. And it's not because it was difficult. It's because it's a movement pattern that I just have not done in years. And so when you start doing movements that you're not used to, especially under moderate resistance, you might find that your body shakes a little bit. And that's not necessarily a muscular or a strength problem. It's more of a neuromuscular problem. It's a pattern. If you can imagine your brain's trying to fire electricity through your body to make that movement happen. And if your neurons are not used to the firing sequence of that movement pattern, there's a good chance electricity is basically going in the wrong direction. And it's trying to figure out what path do we need to fire down to execute this movement smoothly. So that's another dimension of fitness and why it's so important to train for different movements. So it's because your body atrophies in every way if you have not been doing those movements and you haven't been exercising. So you have to re-ingrain the movements themselves in addition to the intensity or the load on that movement. So anyway, we end here with some bicep curls. Again, just focusing on trying to get some strength through my wrist, forearms, elbows, shoulders. So really, I love the TRX. I love these suspension systems. So something you can easily do that not just works the upper body while doing a curl or a tricep press, but you're actually also having to activate your core because your body's basically going down into a mini plank, reverse plank or regular plank. Your core is having to stay on to make sure your body stays straight as you tilt forward and backwards. So that's the end of the video. Stop that. So that is not the end all be all of fitness in any way, especially for older people. This is just a part one of a literally infinite possibility of things that you can be working on, things that you need to be working on. Before I close this out though, I will say fitness, at least for someone like me, is a lot simpler than I think a lot of people make it out to be who haven't studied it, who don't know how to break all movement down into the core essential foundational patterns. Those key patterns break down into essentially 7 different things, and hopefully I can get them all right. But anyway, squat. So a squat pattern, a hinge, a push, a pull. And if you think about it, I think we all know what a squat is. Google's free if not. So squat, there's a million variations of that you can probably visualize without even looking it up. Hinge is basically a deadlift when we bend over, but our knees stay mostly straight. So we're basically bending over to pick up heavy weight, standing back up. Push is an upper body reference, so pushing things away from you anywhere in this plane of motion. So it can be down here, it can be here, it can be here, but pushing activates the muscles on the front side of the upper body. And then a pull, same thing, but opposite direction. You're pulling either yourself to something or something to you, both of which are good to think about, but just break it down easily like that. So pulling things towards you or pulling you to something else in anywhere in this range of motion. That all is going to stimulate the muscles on the back side of your upper body. So those are the 4 things: 2 lower body, 2 upper body, and then we have 2 more. We basically have carry, so a loaded carry, and then a lunge. So a lunge is different than a squat because one leg is behind you, one leg is in front of you, or could even be sideways. There is a side lunge, and that's kind of a mix of like one side's doing a squat, the other side's sort of doing a lunge, but it essentially breaks down into squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, 5, lunge, and then rotation, anti-rotation. That's the 7. It's kind of all in one thing, but if you can imagine being able to rotate your spine, but then it's also equally important to be able to resist rotating your spine. So if something pushes against you, you can refrain from it making you rotate. That's essentially the 7 things all movement breaks down to. Depending on who you talk to, they might fine tune it from there a little bit, but those are essentially the patterns. So no matter what your age is, no matter what your ability level is, it's use it or lose it. So if it's been a long time or it hasn't been a long time, you still need to be going through those patterns and just finding where you're at in that movement pattern, starting from something slow, light, and then working up to either faster or heavier or both. Conditioning is really the same way. So pretty much everyone needs to be working on some sort of run, but your lungs don't necessarily know what movement pattern you're doing. But since running is so universal, it's so human, I'm at a loss for the word, but it is such a fundamental part of being human. Every human of every age should be working on their running ability. So paintballers, we obviously run. We need to be doing lots of running. My fitness programs all include running. But you can do things like get on a stationary bike, an air bike, an elliptical, a Stairmaster, all these things that are designed to just stimulate your metabolic conditioning, your cardiovascular capacity. Any of those things are always good to be on to make sure that we're not just working on our muscles, our movement patterns, our strength, our mobility, our flexibility, but we're also working on our cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory conditioning, our heart, our lungs, our vascular system. Those things have to be stimulated as well. So if this is the only video of mine you ever watch, hopefully everything I just gave you gives you all the tools you need to sit down and go, what are all the movement patterns I need to be working on over the course of my fitness? How do I approach starting from the bottom, working my way up in those movement patterns? And what are all the dimensions of fitness? Strength, flexibility, mobility, cardiovascular conditioning, how are all of those being addressed through my weekly, monthly programs that I'm writing for myself? If you want someone to do all that for you, take all the thinking out of the box for you, and make sure those movements that we're picking out of each of those areas match things that we do in paintball, $10 a month. As of right now, the price will go up as we fill in, but I'm getting off the ground, getting started, so I'm making the cost low so that you guys can get a taste of what this is, see the value, help me make sure my service gets to where it needs to be before I start charging more. But if you want to get in while it's cheaper, it is $10 a month. So cheap. And I do all the thinking for you. I have a virtual workout app that will walk you through every workout from start to finish, warm up, workout to cool down. And again, all the movements match what we do on the paintball field. And there's a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced program. So wherever you are, if you're healthy enough to play paintball, I promise you, you are pretty much guaranteed to be healthy enough to do one of these fitness programs. If you don't know where to start at the bottom, the beginner level, and then we can always work you up to a higher level if that's a little too easy. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was very educational and helpful for you. And if you have specific questions about your own fitness, your equipment that you have access to, please leave those in the comments. The engagement helps, and I will get back to you and respond. I will also be making more videos. Again, it's just been a crazy winter. It's been a little hard getting filming done. Can't always film at the gym because I don't always have empty space where people are not going to walk through the camera. So I'm doing what I can, and the more engagement, the more subscriptions, the more you guys start supporting me, the more I will be able to make this stuff happen. So that concludes this episode. Stay tuned for more, and as always, play better paintball.